Kendall Pierce was invited to her younger sister's wedding, not out of familial affection, but as a spectacle, a public display meant to humiliate her. Her family was certain that after years of disappearing from their lives, Kendall would show up worn down and alone, perfectly fitting the image of the pitiful single mother they loved to mock. Even before she arrived, Kendall could already imagine her parents sitting at the family table, pointing toward the entrance and whispering, "That's the daughter who couldn't keep a husband and couldn't even give us a grandchild." In the banquet hall, soft but cruel laughter mingled with the clinking of champagne glasses. Her sister stood in the center of the room in a dazzling white gown, lips curled in smug triumph, the same expression she'd worn all her life, always victorious, always looking down on Kendall. Everything had been carefully arranged to turn Kendall into the joke of the day. But just as the grand doors swung open and every gaze snapped toward the entrance, the story took a completely different turn. The double doors of the reception hall flew open, and in that instant, the entire atmosphere shifted. Those who had been laughing, waiting to see Kendall slip in alone, fell silent as if someone had pressed pause. Kendall did not appear by herself. At her side stood her new husband, tall, composed, carrying himself as though he had always belonged there. And right behind them were four boys, three three-year-old triplets in matching little suits, and an 8-year-old leading them with the confidence of a young prince. Nearly 200 guests filled the hall, yet it sank into absolute silence, no clinking glasses, no murmurs, no movement at all. Shock rippled from table to table like a wave. It was the perfect moment, the instant when the wedding day her sister had always been so proud of, quietly transformed into her worst nightmare. After the wedding hall fell into stunned silence, Kendall began to tell the story of how everything truly began. She introduced herself as Kendall Pierce and spoke bluntly. What everyone had just witnessed was only the ending. The real tragedy started the day her own family cast her out. Kendall grew up in a wealthy family in Indianapolis, where money was never a problem, but reputation was everything. Her mother was obsessed with appearances, her father was cold and powerful, and her younger sister Reagan was always the pampered princess. Kendall once believed she could live a simple, ordinary life when she married Alex Carter, a kind engineer who wasn't rich, but who made her genuinely happy. Then Alex died in an accident. And just 90 days later, instead of offering comfort, her family asked her only one question: "Are you pregnant yet?" In the end, they handed her a suitcase, $5,000, and told her never to come back. If you've ever been turned away by your own family, comment one to let me know how strong you're still standing today. Thrown out of her home, Kendall stepped onto the street with nothing but a single suitcase, a bit of loose cash, and the feeling that her entire world had collapsed. Once a girl who had lived in a mansion, she now rented a cheap apartment in the city's poor Eastern District, where the hallways always smelled damp and arguments echoed every night. Kendall took a night shift job at a supermarket, standing under harsh fluorescent lights for 8 straight hours, hauling boxes until her hands cracked, her eyes burning from exhaustion. During the day, she rushed from store to store, hunting for discounts, counting every dollar to pay for electricity, rent, and sometimes having to choose between eating properly or saving money for the next month. She had no family, no one to lean on, only the pain of losing her husband and the humiliation of being abandoned by her own blood. Yet in those nights of total exhaustion, Kendall realized one thing: if she collapsed, no one else would stand up for her. And so she had to live not to prove anything to them, but to save herself. One cold afternoon, after finishing her shift, Kendall stopped by a children's support center. There, she met Logan, a small, thin boy with messy hair and blue eyes that always looked as if they were holding back tears. Logan didn't run around like the other children. He sat quietly in a corner, clutching a worn-out teddy bear. The staff told Kendall that he had a congenital heart condition, had undergone multiple treatments, and that almost no one wanted to adopt him because of the high medical costs. As Kendall looked at Logan, she suddenly saw herself, abandoned, treated like a burden, forced to endure everything in silence. She should have walked away. She was poor, barely surviving day to day, but her heart wouldn't let her. Kendall began visiting Logan regularly, bringing sweets, comic books, and small promises. Then one day, she signed the adoption papers, fully aware of the mountain of hardships ahead. From that moment on, Logan was no longer a sick child. He became the first family Kendall had ever chosen for herself. After adopting Logan, Kendall felt an even stronger need to understand why her life had been judged so cruelly by her own family. She had been labeled unable to have children, blamed for her husband's disappointment, and treated as the reason the Pierce family had lost face. Because of that, she decided to undergo a full medical checkup and fertility tests, even though she was terrified that the truth might stab once more at an old wound. But the results left Kendall completely stunned. She was perfectly healthy, she had never been infertile, not for a single day. The doctor explained that the issue had been Alex, her late husband. He was the one who couldn't have children. Kendall sat there in silence for a long time, overwhelmed by pain and anger, as a horrifying realization settled in. For years, her family had piled all the blame onto her simply to justify abandoning her, and they had never cared to know the truth. If you've ever been misunderstood and forced to carry that injustice for far too long, comment one to let me know you're not alone. Not long after, Kendall's life seemed to open onto a bright new chapter. She finally pursued her passion for baking, something her family had once dismissed as pointless, and opened Pierce and Sweet Bakery. It started as a small shop, but thanks to her skill and relentless hard work, business flourished. Soon she opened a second location, then a third. And then came the greatest miracle of all. Kendall became pregnant. She gave birth to healthy, adorable triplet boys, a reward for all the years of suffering she had endured. For the first time in a very long while, Kendall truly had a complete family. Just when it seemed she had completely cut ties with the past, Kendall unexpectedly received a call from her mother after 8 years of silence. Her mother's voice was sweet to the point of sounding fake, some polite small talk first, then straight to the real purpose, inviting Kendall back for Reagan's wedding. Before Kendall could even react, her mother emphasized, "Come home, everyone misses you so much," as if they had never thrown her out with nothing but a suitcase and $5,000. Kendall hesitated, but what sent a chill through her was the wedding date. It fell exactly on the anniversary of Alex's death, too perfect a coincidence to be accidental. Soon after, Kendall saw the family group chat buzzing with mockery. They placed bets on how she would show up, whether she would bring along her sick adopted child, and whether she could even afford a decent dress or would have to wear old clothes. Kendall read every message, her hands shaking with rage. But this time, she didn't cry. She understood clearly now. They never wanted reconciliation. They just wanted another chance to laugh at her. And Kendall made her decision. She would show up not to beg for acceptance, but to put an end to everything. A public humiliation. The guests, mostly wealthy people connected to the Pierce family, whispered about the eldest daughter who had vanished for years. Their voices carried that mix of curiosity and contempt. Kendall must be broke now, still a single mom, because no one would marry her, and adopting a child was probably just her way of covering up the fact that she couldn't have kids. Some even sneered that she would show up to beg for money or cling to the family name for status. At the center table, Kendall's mother let out dramatic sighs, playing the role of the heartbroken parent of a rebellious daughter, while her father wore that same icy expression, as if Kendall were a stain that needed to be hidden. Reagan, the bride, was especially delighted. She floated around, greeting guests, smiling brightly, but never missing a chance to jab. "Hopefully my sister won't be late, or too broke to even leave an envelope." And everyone was waiting for Kendall to walk in so they could finally see her failure, exactly as they'd imagined. What they didn't know was that their waiting would turn out to be the biggest mistake of all. Just as every eye was still fixed on the doors, the murmurs abruptly died when the sound of an expensive car pulling up echoed from outside. Kendall stepped out of a Rolls-Royce Spectre, calm and confident, as if she had never been looked down on a day in her life. She wore a fitted yellow couture gown, shimmering like sunlight, with diamonds blazing at her wrist and ears under the reception lights. Beside her was Nathan, polished in a Tom Ford suit, his hand clasped in Kendall's like a statement to everyone watching. She was not alone anymore. Right behind them came 4 boys, Logan in front, serious but proud, and the 3 little triplets trailing after in matching tiny suits, impossibly adorable. Kendall's mother dropped her champagne glass. Her father stood frozen. Reagan stared so hard she let her bouquet slip from her hands. Kendall only smiled faintly and delivered the line that made the entire room feel like it might explode. "Thank you for saving the best seat for me." After the ceremony, everything moved faster than anyone could have imagined, like a storm sweeping away the Pierce family's arrogance. A video capturing the moment Kendall walked in with her husband and 4 sons spread across social media at lightning speed. People weren't just talking about the Rolls Royce or the couture dress, they were furious about how her own family had once abandoned her. The mocking comments from that day immediately backfired, turning Reagan from the perfect bride into someone being dragged and criticized everywhere. The scandal exploded so hard that the groom's side panicked. His family, afraid their reputation would be damaged, called off the marriage, leaving Reagan in humiliating shock right after the wedding. At the same time, Kendall's father's company began to crumble as partners backed out one by one, unwilling to get tangled up in the fallout. Contracts were canceled, deals were frozen, and the stock price plunged. And Kendall, the one who was supposed to be publicly shamed, became the inspiring symbol of a plot twist comeback. She didn't need revenge in words. She only had to show up at the right moment, and karma found the people who had looked down on her all on its own. After everything, Kendall didn't choose to cling to the past or strike back again. Quietly, she blocked all contact from her former family and returned to the life she had built with her own hands. She kept expanding her bakery, but what made her happiest was using that success to help others. She founded a charity to support single mothers and underprivileged children, people who had once been judged with the same prejudice she had faced. Logan grew up healthy and strong, becoming her pride, while the triplets filled their home with laughter and warmth every day. Nathan remained by her side, not as a savior, but as a true partner. Kendall came to understand that family isn't where you're born, it's where you're loved, respected, and chosen. And at last, she had found exactly that.